Well, we're going to pick up on where we left off with Paul Craine, who joined us recently. And Paul, lots of people got quite a lot of information from you, and I think it's sort of satisfaction to have things explained to them. So we've got a whole set of new graphs. But of course, the one, Paul, we're going to start with is the one that government shows us every day anyway, which is obviously these three different scenarios, and then the deaths put on top of that. It's looking pretty, I mean, I know you shouldn't use those words, but pretty good in the sense there's less than anticipated.
Yes, that's a useful reminder that it's worth saying. I'm hugely aware that the data we're looking at are people's lives, people feeling threatened, families having lost people, and so on. I don't lose sight of that, even though I'm trying to show the data visually to help me and others. Yes, the first graph you've got is these three scenarios, and you can see the data of the number of cases in the Isle of Man has risen, has peaked, has fallen. We're now down into this phase where there's 5 out of the last 6 days have had no new cases. So we appear to follow a trajectory that is much, much better than any of the scenarios that were painted. But of course, this is perhaps a first wave, and we mustn't assume that everything's solved, problems gone away. Most people living in the Isle of Man have not experienced the virus, have not built immunity, etc., etc. So we've still got the question of where we go from here, and that's to come. But you can see that first graph useful to give a bigger picture. And the second graph, I don't know if you're able to show that, but that gives the Isle of Man data in greater detail, and you can see where we're at. And since the 22nd, yesterday was the 27th, the data through to there, just one new case. In fact, on the graph that follows that, I've called it 2.1 there, Paul, I've put in at the top of it just the number of new cases per week. And we can see how over the 5 weeks, and we're now well into the 6th week, but over those 5 weeks, we've seen the cases hit 96 in week 3, 94 in week 4, right down to 23 in week 5, even though that's when the issue of the care home in the south was happening and there were new cases there. So we really have done remarkably well. And I give credit to government and health service and people for sort of following the advice to stay safe and isolate, really. But there's huge good news in that graph. Okay, the third graph there is showing the total number of coronavirus cases. That would be in the blue bars, which continue behind the orange where they're there. So we can see the cases have really leveled out at that 307, 308 cases. It's been that for a week now. And the number of people presumed recovered is up at 248. So we can see the vast majority of the cases are now presumed recovered. Out of the 308 in the bar on the right on the 27th yesterday, 308 new cases, 248 presumed recovered. We know there's 20 deaths in there, and that's just leaving 40 active cases at the moment. And that's, again, there's a lot of good news in that graph as we're moving through this.
And in graph 4, the plateauing is easily seen here in the hospital. It's really has just plateaued, hasn't it?
Yes, the next graph you've got is actually the number of people in hospital in the Isle of Man, and we can see that has tended to go in jumps there, but we're at 22 people being treated in hospital. That has not yet started going down, whereas the last graph we saw will only ever get higher as more new cases appear. This is the number in hospital at this moment in time, and it would be good to see those cases dropping, but it's still a reminder that we've got this issue, 22 people in hospital, and that's, we worry for them and hope they'll pull through.
The next one, of course, is interesting because it's showing deaths because in the community and also in hospital in relation to each other.
It is. Well, what it's showing there is the total number of deaths is in the darker pink, and that continues behind the bars in lighter pink. But we can see the lighter pink bars are the deaths in the community. And our understanding of that is this is just the deaths that have happened in the care home in the south. And yeah, gosh, I feel for the families who've lost loved ones there, and for the staff there who must have been through an horrendous time. But in fact, we've heard today that 2 of the deaths in hospital were actually residents of that care home. And so there's only 3 deaths that have occurred here that have nothing to do with the care home issue. So there is good news in this, although what a tragedy, really, when you look at the deaths in care that have taken place here.
The Chamber of Commerce brought out this business impact tracker. Take us through that.
Yes, I'm hugely aware that the data that's out there relating to the Isle of Man and coronavirus is not just about the health side to it. There's all the other range of issues that are there. And so I've taken some of the data from the latest Chamber of Commerce Business Impact Tracker. You can see at the bottom of this graph the number of responses that contributed to each graph. But in the first graph there, the one on the left, 367 responses. These are businesses, some small businesses, 1 to 10 employees, some people self-employed, it's their own business, but others much larger businesses, some very large businesses in there. So they've had replies to this question from 367 responses. And the question, has revenue decreased since the crisis hit? And we can see that 94% of those 370 nearly companies are saying, yes, the revenue has decreased. And so we're getting, clear impressions of the scale of the problem out there. The second graph is then looking at those businesses that are planning permanent workforce reductions in the next week. This was the data was taken. You can see it was published 24th of April. So it's the week prior to that we're looking at. And 16% of these businesses were planning permanent workforce reduction. This is quite separate from staff being furloughed. This is people whose job losses are permanent. So we can understand the issues that must be calling for some households, some families, and so on. And then the one on the right, I've taken out. This was the question about: do you expect your business to survive the effects of the coronavirus? And we can see that the number saying no is quite small, just 3% odd, but 23% are saying yes, 74% are saying yes, they expect to survive with the right government support. Without that government support, perhaps they wouldn't be in the yes category. So we get a picture here of the issues that are going on and the financial costs going on in the business community here as we go through the coronavirus, as we go through this lockdown with our borders closed and so on, which was a brilliant move to close the borders as early as we did. But it's not without its issues in relation to businesses and the economy. And I've got a couple of graphs that follow, Paul, that I've then taken from the Island Global Research website, a marketing company that I know a lot of people are following what they're doing because they're producing data relating to Isle of Man, Jersey, and Guernsey. So graph 7 there is a really interesting one. It was asking the question, which of the following have you started doing, or you're doing much more often as a result of COVID-19? This is ways in which our actions and interaction, the ways in which they're changing. And the question that I would apply behind that is how many of these will continue after the coronavirus is all over? So we've got figures over 60% are using video conferencing now. That presumably a great deal of that will remain. Ordinary groups. I ran our scout group on Friday on Zoom.
That could have a big impact for business travelling, couldn't it, really? Because people are going to get much more used to doing it remotely and getting used to it, I think.
More and more people working from home is part of the pattern. And will that continue? For years we've been arguing that there should be more work from home, and that appears to have really opened up in these last few weeks. Use of social media, of course, but then shopping online for groceries and for non-groceries hitting over 20, over 30%. Using online banking, all of these have implications for the way businesses will work in the future. So it's interesting to see this and to consider how many of these will be permanent changes in our world. Not they've happened because we've been in this position, but will they continue to happen? And then the final one there is about looking at the impact on people in other ways. So the first of the graphs is about what amount of stress or anxiety have you experienced in the past week. The Ireland Global Research surveys, it appears that you can enter into the survey, and I'm not sure to what extent the people therefore are entering this are representative of the island average, as it were. Would be something you perhaps want to look into. But we can see there that if you look at the two wedges on the left-hand side there between them, the moderate and the large, over 40%. This is specifically Isle of Man on this one, so over 40% of the people in the Isle of Man said they'd had moderate to large stress and anxiety in the last week. People worried over family, worried over jobs, worried over health, and so on. So we can see the impact that this has. Some of that is from our current position in lockdown and so on, and the anxieties that come. And then on the right, looking at how satisfied do you feel with life right now, and people were given a choice of they could score it from 0 through to 10. 0 means that they're having the worst possible life. 10, they're having the best possible life. And we can see 19% of the population in the Isle of Man there on this survey were saying they were having the worst possible life through to 4. 0 to 4 is the range that they're in. So they've been called by Island Global Research people who are suffering. They're scoring under half, 0 to 4. At the other end, 32% are scoring 8 to 10. They're sort of thriving on this. I've got the colours on the.
Yeah, I'm just noticing that should be a yellow, right? Explain that one instead of green, but yeah. So thriving is interesting, 32%.
Yeah. Yes, and so some people doing fine with this. Maybe their jobs are not affected, their pay's not affected. They're perhaps they don't go out a great deal normally. They're still getting some exercise. They feel they're thriving. But at the other end, it's worrying to see that.